Hi there, my name is Kerns. I am a transpersonal counselor slash tarot reader, spiritual coach. However you want to look at that, I deal in the realm of spiritual coaching and transpersonal counseling. So which transpersonal counseling is, just to give you a brief idea, think of you going to a regular psychologist, but we don't deal in the mind. What we deal is with the soul's evolution or the spiritual evolution. So it's much less stringent than dealing with a counselor in the way of like a psychologist. This is a lot more free flowing. It is a lot more fun, I feel, just because I've been around psychology and, not to knock anybody who's in that field, but this is a lot more free flowing where we work with our clients to help them along their soul evolution. So I use intuitive measures to do that. We can use tools such as tarot cards, Reiki, some people use runes, different spiritual tools and modality. So as far as what got me into this particular field, it actually started when I was really young. When I was young, I used to start with astrology. And I began kind of sneaking in the back of the magazines when my mom would take me to the store, and I would look up the horoscopes. And as I would look up the horoscopes, I would try my best to remember what the horoscope said, and then I would watch the people in my life and see if their particular zodiac, if the manifestation of what the horoscope said actually came through. So I began observing people and observing their signs. And then as I got older, I would do things like go to the library. I would sneak and, read astrology books. And the reason why I say I was sneaking around was because I grew up in a very traditional Christian upbringing. And so the type of work that I do now would be considered, by all means, witchcraft or, whatever people want to label it as a negative thing. So me moving into this transpersonal counseling was me actually doing the work that I would end up doing for my clients that I did on myself, because I went and I received my degree in accounting, and I worked in accounting for several years before I eventually realized that I was unhappy and unfulfilled in that particular area and needed to move out into my soul's purpose. And I only got through that by then, dealing with the spiritual modalities, dealing with tarot readings, oracle cards, and doing the work that I do now for other people. So I find that personally, my clients, I often bring them into this journey where we figure out what their real life purpose is, and that begins them on that journey. And so it's been amazing, not just for myself to live fulfilled in the work that I'm called here to do on this earth, but to do that for so many people. And I have had some amazing clients around the world. I've dealt with a princess in Uganda. I've done celebrity readings and had them as clients. I've done just amazing people from all over the world. Now, I typically work with women, but I do work with men as well that are more into the spiritual side of life, or, looking to get inside of that side of their lives. So my expertise in my field, it has definitely increased my passion for this work, because it was something that I did on myself for years, making the steps to break the chains of, feeling like you have to go along with what your family does or what your family wants, to working a traditional job in accounting, and then moving along to, working for myself and doing spiritual work. Of all of that, when I was raised in such a Christian upbringing, was a huge transformation, and it took a lot of courage for me to step out on that particular path and journey. And so for me, helping others through that process is just amazing. And I feel like it's something that we definitely need for ourselves and our culture especially. So the disenfranchisement of Black people, how it's affected me is I've grown up in a very small town, and in the small town that I grew up in, it was predominantly white, but there was this one small section where Black people lived and worked and communed with one another. So we had a very, very small section of the community. And so you can see the disenfranchisement just in that alone, with Black people living on one side of the tracks and white people living on the other side of the tracks. The jobs were, vastly different. The opportunities, what you saw in that Black section of town and what happened there was vastly different from what happened on the other side of the tracks, right? So for me, I was fortunate enough to where my mom made a conscious decision to get me as much as possible on the other side of the tracks. So the friends that I grew up with, the people that I hung out with, wasn't just in my own neighborhood. It was also dealing with people who would be more socially progressed, I would say, or financially progressed in a way. And so I got to see both sides of living in disenfranchisement and then also living in wealth. And that has helped me a lot with just dealing and working with people and just relating to them, but also to understanding their mindsets and where they come from. So as far as whether or not I think it's possible for us to unite, absolutely, it's possible for us to unite. I feel like our unity, though, is going to come on a much different basis than it just physically being together. So if you think about Black Wall Street, for instance, and the various Black Wall Streets that happened all over the United States, right? Because it just wasn't in just one particular area. You had a Black Wall Street in North Carolina. You had them in several different places, right? Tulsa. But one of the things that happens is when we only think about it physically and we're physically thinking about unity, then it leaves us, I feel, open to, things happening like how they happen. People coming in and bombing and, creating chaos and burning down our businesses. And so while we can't live in fear of anything like that, I feel like the true unity of our people is going to come from us uniting on a very spiritual basis. It's going to be a spiritual heart matter, you know what I mean? Not just, something to where we're physically getting together and physically doing these particular things. It has to be in our hearts. It has to be in our culture. And I feel like that's going to come by us reconnecting to ourselves spiritually as well as to our culture, again, spiritually as well. So if I think about the past and if it affects the future, absolutely. There is this term that they use, especially in the Gullah community, and it's called Sankofa, right? And Sankofa means to go back and fetch it. And it's often depicted as a swan with its head reaching backwards and grabbing this egg, right? So as far as going back to the past in order to affect our future, that's our culture, that comes from West African mindset. And this is what I mean when I say that it's important for us to go back to our spiritual practices and our spiritual roots, because understanding that the past and getting the right information for what our past is going to be so important as to how we're built up culturally, and us going back and fetching our spiritual practices, us going back and picking up our mindsets again, because we're so separated from the traditional African cultural mindset. And so, yes, absolutely, going back to the past and picking up some of those old ways is going to be wonderful for us to go forward in the future, because we can use a lot of those practices, a lot of those rituals, a lot of that mindset in order to set ourselves free. And that's what I mean by it being a very spiritual unity that needs to happen by us going back and retrieving all of that, we have lost.